We begin this morning with those legal battles. Former President Trump is fighting on multiple fronts.
First, the developments at the federal level. Last night, a U.S. appeals court allowed the Justice Department to resume its review of the documents that it took from Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate last month. Now, the DOJ was appealing a ruling made by another federal judge, a Trump appointee, who had temporarily barred the DOJ from reviewing those documents as part of its criminal investigation into the former president. Meanwhile, in New York, we're covering the fallout this morning after the state's Attorney General, Letitia James, filed a civil lawsuit against Trump, his family, and the Trump Organization, alleging more than 200 instances of fraud. We've got team coverage ahead for you this morning. We're going to start with NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, who's outside Trump Tower in New York, and NBC News legal analyst Danny Ceballos, who joins us here on set. Vaughn, let's start with you. The New York Attorney General's lawsuit, some very serious allegations here. Walk us through it and also how Trump and his team are responding.
Over the course of a 220-page lawsuit, you guys, the New York Attorney General lays out the 3.5-year investigation that her office took part in to lead here to this moment. The next step would be to go to the state court, and it's the financial penalties and other corporate penalties that could be the biggest impact for Donald Trump, his 3 children, and his family. Over the course of the lawsuit, she alleges that in more than 200 instances that he and the company inflated the value of their properties and their assets. Just take the Trump property, the Trump Tower property, where he lived here in New York, for example. Saying and contending, alleging that he actually made the apartment on paper 3 times larger than it is in reality, therefore inflating the cost by potentially as much as 3-fold. This is a situation where you see in the report, Letitia James write, with the help of his children and senior executives of the Trump Organization, Donald Trump falsely inflated his net worth by billions of dollars to unjustly enrich himself and cheat the system. And throughout the course of the lawsuit, you see the outlining of the falsification of business records, issuing of false financial statements, the ways in which he allegedly engaged in insurance fraud, and multiple cases laid out of ways in which he conspired with these other individuals to commit these violations. But again, it's the potential penalties, not only a $250 million fine that could be laid down, but it would also permanently bar Donald Trump and his children from ever being officers of any corporation in New York City, which could put into question the future fate of the Trump Organization.
Many potential consequences there, and that's not all. Danny, the Attorney General said that she would send a criminal referral to the IRS and to federal prosecutors based on this lawsuit. So what else could Trump be facing?
It is essentially a dare to the federal government, to the IRS and the Justice Department. Here's all the work we've done. You should probably take a look at this. The question is not so much whether or not they will open an investigation. They surely will. Maybe they already have. But whether or not they will ultimately indict is a very different question. Letitia James's complaint and her civil action requires only proof of a preponderance of the evidence, which is 51%, a far cry from the beyond a reasonable doubt standard used in criminal cases. DOJ knows that. The IRS knows that. They're going to consider that beyond just whether or not there is some damning evidence in this complaint. They need to think about whether or not, if they dare to indict Donald Trump, which no one has tried before, can they prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt?
All right, let's turn to the Mar-a-Lago investigation. And Vaughn, the federal appeals court now allowing the DOJ to look at the documents that were seized at the estate. What does this mean for that investigation into Trump?
Yeah, this was significant because there was going to be a potential delay of weeks, if not months here, in which the Department of Justice investigators were going to be able to look at particularly the more than 100 documents seized from Mar-a-Lago that were marked classified. The judge in Cannon, Judge Cannon in Florida, had essentially put a hold on this process and left it up to the special master to comb through these documents and determine whether the Department of Justice investigators were going to be able to look at the contents of these documents that were seized. What happened ultimately was an appeal by the Department of Justice to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals in Atlanta. And that was what that new issue last night was from the Circuit Court of Appeals. There were about 11,000 10,000 documents in whole that were seized from Mar-a-Lago. So about 10,900 of them are still going to have to go through the special master, who will determine whether there is executive privilege, client attorney privilege, or issues over classification. But those really, what the Department of Justice believes to be the most important 100 documents, those that had classified markings on them, the DOJ is going to be able to move forward with its investigation, looking into those particular documents while the special master looks through those other thousands of other documents that were not classified in the same way.
And Trump was actually on Fox News last night talking about those documents that were seized at Mar-a-Lago. Let's take a listen.
You had said on Truth Social a number of times you did declassify.
I did declassify, yes.
Okay. Is there a process? What was your process to declassify?
It doesn't have to be a process, as I understand it. You know, there's different people say different things, but as I understand, there doesn't have to be. If you're the president of the United States, you can declassify just by saying it's declassified, even by thinking about it, because you're sending it to Mar-a-Lago or to wherever you're sending it. And there doesn't have to be a process.
Plenty of disagreement on that. So how do you think the DOJ might interpret that claim?
I'm aware of 0 instances where the executive can create some action by just thinking about it. If he doesn't tell anyone, doesn't tweet about it, doesn't write it down in a memo, there is no such thing as executive action by thought alone. You got to do a little more than that.
All right. And bottom line is they haven't made that argument yet in court,
oh,
right?
There's that too. Yes. There's the fact that his attorneys will not make that same argument in court, even though he's on record saying, I did declassify them apparently by thinking about it. But his attorneys have only gone so far to say is, well, he hypothetically has that power to do so.
Yet again, in multiple courts, the actual court and the court of public opinion. All right. Danny Savalos, Von Hilliard, thank you both so much.
Let's continue our coverage with NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Rafa, who joins us now. Ali, good morning to you. So we've got a new Morning Consult poll that shows that Trump's support among the GOP is slipping. The question now, are we seeing his support slipping at all among elected Republicans on Capitol Hill? Are we getting any reaction there to this New York AG's lawsuit?
Yeah, good morning, guys. Well, I asked several Republican lawmakers about this latest development yesterday, and it really seems to have cemented the divisions that we've already seen with previous lawsuits against the former president. You know, you have the regular Trump defenders like Senators Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham saying yesterday that this lawsuit is a political stunt, saying that no one is going to pay attention to this, calling this just another example of Democrats going after Trump, that it'll have no impact on the midterm elections. I spoke with House GOP Conference Chair Elise Stefanik, who said that this was, quote, Tish James on a deranged anti-Trump mission since she became Attorney General, saying this is just another chapter of a, quote, illegitimate witch hunt. And then you have other Republicans who are saying that this is really taking the focus and attention off of issues that they say matter more to voters, especially ahead of these midterm elections. Senator Mitt Romney telling me yesterday that the more we talk about Trump, the more that it takes the focus off of issues like inflation, crime, the crisis at the border. So no doubt that, you know, even though that some Republicans are running to Trump's defense, there's no doubt that this is definitely not what Republicans want or need to be talking about, especially in these last few weeks ahead of the midterm elections.
And Ali, quickly, I want to turn to yet another investigation, the January 6th investigation. We now know Ginny Thomas, the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, has agreed to be interviewed by the House Select Committee. Talk about the significance of that development and what does the committee hope to learn from her?
Yeah, this was a long time coming. There's been months of back and forth between the January 6th committee and Ginny Thomas. As we know, the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, her and her legal team. And we learned late last night that the committee has come to an agreement for Ginny Thomas to come forward before the panel and answer questions. Some of the things that she could shed light on are some of the efforts to overturn the election. The committee says that it has email exchanges between Ginny Thomas and former Trump lawyer John Eastman about efforts to overturn the election. We also know that she was communicating with former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows in the days before January 6th. And so her lawyer says that this was just her efforts because she was caring about her country, that it has nothing to do with efforts to engage on January 6th. We know she wasn't physically present at the Capitol that day, but this is something that the committee has been very interested in learning more about. We know that they plan to have at least least one more hearing that's set for next week. It's still to be determined whether, she comes forward before then and whether the information she could share could possibly impact those that next hearing, possibly more hearings.
All right, Ali Rafa, thank you so much.
All right, now to the latest on the war in Ukraine. Speaking before the UN General Assembly yesterday, President Biden sharply criticized Russian President Vladimir Putin after his announcement of a partial military mobilization in Russia after his threats of nuclear retaliation in Kyiv if that doesn't lay down its weapons. President Biden said Russia, quote, shamelessly violated United Nations principles with its invasion of Ukraine. Biden also said he wants the war to end on peaceful terms.
We stood with Ukraine. Like you, the United States wants this war to end on just terms, on terms we all signed up for, that you cannot seize a nation's territory by force, that the only country standing in the way of that is Russia.
NBC News White House correspondent Carol Lee joins us now for more on this. And Carol, some stinging words from President Biden yesterday, for sure. Walk us through some of his comments that stood out to you.
Well, what stood out is that the president, from the beginning of his speech, really right out of the gate, he sought to isolate Vladimir Putin on this world stage, and he really called him out as the one man who's responsible for the war in Ukraine, and also saying that he's the only one who still wants to continue this war. Now, the president's speech, obviously, Russian President Vladimir Putin had spoken before the president took to the stage, and so the White House was changing some of what his speech had to say. The theme largely stayed the same in terms of what the message the president wanted to deliver, according to White House officials, but they did tweak it somewhat to address Putin's threats of using nuclear weapons and this plus up in Russian troops that he's planning in Ukraine. Take a listen to President Biden.
President Putin has made overt nuclear threats against Europe and a reckless disregard for the responsibilities of the non-proliferation regime. Now, Russia's calling up more soldiers to join the fight. This world should see these outrageous acts for what they are. Putin claims he had to act because Russia was threatened, but no one threatened Russia.
Now, in terms of the threat of using nuclear weapons from President Putin, what a senior administration official tells us is that there is no evidence yet, nothing tangible that the U.S. is seeing that Putin is backing that rhetoric up with action. So they don't have information that shows this is something that's moving, that would be imminent or is potentially happening sometime soon. But they say that the administration says this is very concerning rhetoric.
Striking to hear an American president target not only one country, but one specific person at the General Assembly like that. And Carol, we're also hearing 2 previously detained U.S. citizens are among those who have been released as part of a major prisoner exchange between Russia and Ukraine. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's right. So there were 2 Americans who were part of this prisoner exchange that was brokered by the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia. Those 2 Americans have been released and are in Saudi custody. They'll go through some medical checks and then will return to the U.S. That's Alex Drueke and Andy Nguyen. And we're hearing from the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, who issued a statement saying the United States is appreciative of Ukraine, including all prisoners of war, regardless of nationality, in its negotiations. And we look forward to these U.S. citizens being reunited with their families. We're also hearing from the families of the Americans who are being released. The aunt and mother of Alex Drueke issued a statement saying they are thrilled that Andy and Alex will be free, and they look forward to them coming home as well. So a bit of a victory for the U.S. in what has been a large-scale tragedy in Ukraine.
So much relief for those families. All right, Carol, thank you.
For more on the president's speech at the UN and on the Russian war in Ukraine, let's bring in retired Lieutenant General Sept. He's an NBC News military analyst and former deputy commander of the United States European Command. Lieutenant General, good morning. Good to have you with us. So, this was a rare chance for the president to speak in front of leaders from all around the globe. In your mind, did he deliver? What's your reaction to his comments on the war?
Yes, I absolutely think he delivered. There's 3 key points that I took away from the speech. Number one, that Russia violated the core tenets of the UN by encroaching on another country or attacking a sovereign country. Very important that he calls that out. Number two, Russia's threat to use nukes, obviously totally irresponsible and reckless on President Putin's behalf. And then the third one he talked about is the sham referendums that are supposed to occur in the 4 oblasts on tomorrow. All three of those totally irresponsible. So I thought he did a good job calling those out.
Also heard from Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. He addressed the UN General Assembly in a taped video. Let's listen to some of what he said, then we'll talk about it on the other side.
Ukraine wants peace. Europe wants peace. The world wants peace. And we have seen who is the only one who wants war. There is only one entity among all UN member states who would say now, if he could interrupt my speech, that he's happy with this war.
Okay, so Zelensky didn't mention Putin by name there, but he did call on Russia to be punished for the war. So as Putin calls for more troops to fight, as Ukraine appears to continue to pick up momentum, what should be Ukraine's strategy going forward?
Well, that's just it. Ukraine must continue the momentums. They've consolidated their gains. They've had success in at least taking 8,000 kilometers of territory back. So they must continue that. The winter months coming, so they have to figure out how they continue to keep this pressure on, because at the end of the day, what it's going to be about is taking more territory and ensuring that they have a position of strength that we can ever get to the bargaining table.
We should also note Putin's decision to call out more troops has led to protests on the streets in Moscow and St. Petersburg yesterday. Numerous protesters were detained. Quickly, Lieutenant General, what do these protests tell us about the support within Russia for this war?
Well, I think just as the soldiers on the battlefield, the Russian soldiers on the battlefield, the people as well, they don't understand this war. It's been called a special operation, not war. Now, by calling up folks out of the Russian population to go join this particular special operation, folks are confused. They don't understand. They have soldiers coming back in body bags. So this war has not been properly communicated to the soldiers that are fighting, nor the Russian population.
All right, Lieutenant General Twitty, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate your analysis.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Moving on to your money now. The Federal Reserve raising interest rates again.
Yeah, benchmark interest rates are going up 0.75 of a percentage point, but many economists believe it's not the last.
NBC News business and data reporter Brian Chung is here now. Brian, good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. And this latest hike, though, doesn't really come as a surprise. We know Fed Chair Jerome Powell spoke about it yesterday. What did he have to say?
Yeah, markets expected that to be 0.75 percentage points in that meeting yesterday. That's exactly what happened. So why did markets sell off about 1.7%? It's because of the commentary and the somber outlook, let's put it, that the Fed Chair Jay Powell offered in his press conference yesterday. One big reason, there's a lot of things out of his control. Take a listen.
Part of this inflation is caused by this series of supply shocks that we've had, beginning with the pandemic and really with the reopening of the economy, and more recently amplified and added to by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. What we need to do is get rates up to the point where we're putting meaningful downward pressure on inflation, and that's what we're doing.
And getting rates up, what he referred to there implies that there are more rate hikes on the way. One challenge here is that he said he's unsure if these rate hikes in totality will lead to a recession. Again, that's because of things like the Russian invasion of Ukraine. There are a lot of other external factors that could be weighing on the U.S. economic outlook as well.
So what happens if those additional rate hikes in the coming months don't have the impact on people's wallets that they're hoping for? Does the Fed have any other tools here to fight inflation, or is this their main tool?
Well, it's important to note that while a lot of people look to the Federal Reserve to say they need to use their interest rate tools, right, increasing borrowing costs to make it more expensive for households and businesses to borrow, maybe that takes economic pace down a little bit in a way that could take inflation down. They're not the only ones that can do that, though. Fiscal policy, which is translation, Congress, the White House, those types of policymakers can do things as well in a more targeted way. So if you look at the components of inflation that have really taken a leg up and might continue to take a leg up in the future, think about rents, for example, right? A lot of people getting concessions during 2020. There's a reversal of that now for anyone that's tried to sign a new one-year lease. Everyone's aware of that. Also, energy prices. Yes, gasoline has come down. Who's to say if that's going to reverse at any point in time? Those are things that fiscal policymakers in Congress in Washington, D.C. have the ability to address.
I wanted to quickly ask you, we also got a glimpse of the Fed's broader economic forecast. What can you tell us about those projections?
So, again, these are things that come out quarterly. So the Fed chair, in addition to the announcement yesterday, also had some outlook on where unemployment, economic growth, and inflation could go in the future. And we talked about this yesterday a little bit, with the Federal Reserve expected to see inflation remaining high through at least the next year or two. But what's really interesting were their projections on unemployment. They're projecting that the unemployment rate could go up as they raise interest rates from 3.7% as of August to 4.4% next year. And even though that doesn't sound like all that much, keep in mind that would be about 1.2 million more Americans than now put out of work. So a very, very serious thing we're talking about here.
Big number.
Yeah, especially with unemployment being such a bright spot in the otherwise grim economy. All right, Brian, thanks so much.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.